Why is that boy studying under a streetlight when we have state-of-the-art libraries? Dean Richardson wondered, approaching the solitary figure. What he couldn't understand was why Marcus Johnson, brilliant scholarship student, mathematical prodigy, refused to sit down in any classroom. "The light is good here, sir," Marcus answered, his face revealing nothing of the agony sitting caused him. But when Professor Whitfield publicly accused him of cheating, everything changed. A cobbler's son with no access to advanced academic circles somehow independently derived postdoctoral level mathematics. Dr. Harrington's disbelief was palpable. How could they know the price Marcus had already paid for his brilliance? What shocking truth would force Harvard's elite to reconsider everything they believed about talent, privilege, and justice? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Dean Michael Richardson's polished leather shoes clicked against the cobblestone pathway as he made his way home through Harvard Yard. The autumn evening had settled over Cambridge, casting long shadows across the historic campus. Most students would be in their dormitories or the library at this hour, but something caught the dean's eye. A young black man stood beneath a streetlight at the edge of campus, an open textbook balanced in one hand, a notebook in the other. He wasn't sitting on the nearby bench but remained perfectly still, absorbed in advanced calculus equations. "Excuse me," Dean Richardson called, approaching the figure. "The Widener Library is open until midnight. You'd be more comfortable studying there." The young man looked up, his eyes revealing both intelligence and caution. "Thank you, sir, but I'm fine here." "Are you a student?" Richardson asked, noticing the young man's worn clothes contrasting with the expensive textbook. "Yes, sir. Marcus Johnson, first year." His posture remained upright, almost rigid. "Well, Marcus, I'm Dean Richardson. Why study in the cold when there are perfectly good facilities available?" Marcus hesitated. "The light is good here, sir." Richardson's brow furrowed. Something didn't add up. Harvard's newest scholarship students often felt out of place, but this seemed different. "That's one of Professor Whitfield's advanced mathematics texts," Richardson observed. "Challenging material." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, his eyes returning to the page. "I need to master Chapter 7 by tomorrow." "And you prefer to do that standing in the cold rather than sitting in our heated library?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Marcus's face. "Yes, sir. I prefer to stand." Richardson nodded slowly, sensing there was more to the story. "Well, don't stay out too late. Excellence requires rest as well as determination." As he walked away, Richardson glanced back. The young man had already returned to his studies, his silhouette perfectly still beneath the glow of the streetlight, a solitary figure against the backdrop of America's most prestigious university. The cobbler's workshop was small but meticulously organized. Samuel Johnson hunched over his workbench, his skilled hands bringing new life to a worn pair of Oxfords. Classical music played softly from an old radio, filling the modest space with Bach's compositions. "Dad, I'm home," Marcus called as he entered through the back door, carefully setting his backpack on a clean spot on the counter. Samuel looked up, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "How was your day at Harvard, Professor?" Marcus laughed at their private joke. "Not a professor yet." "Just a matter of time," Samuel said, setting down his tools. "Come, sit and eat something. I made stew." Marcus remained standing. "I'll eat standing, Dad. Back's acting up today." Samuel's smile faded. "Professor Whitfield's class." 3 hours of advanced calculus, Marcus confirmed. But her equations were beautiful, challenging in all the right ways. Samuel shook his head, anger flashing briefly in his eyes. "I still think we should have told the admissions office about your condition." "And risk losing my scholarship?" "Dad, we both know Harvard doesn't want complicated scholarship cases." Samuel sighed, ladling stew into a bowl. Your mother would be so proud, seeing you at Harvard. Marcus looked at the faded photograph on the wall, his mother in her nurse's uniform, smiling broadly. I know. 17 acceptance letters, Samuel said proudly. My son, the genius. Just dedicated, Marcus corrected, eating his stew standing at the counter. Like someone else I know who works 14 hours a day. Samuel glanced around his small shop. This place put food on our table and paid for all those advanced books you devoured. No shame in honest work. None at all, Marcus agreed. That's why I'm going to make sure this education counts for something real. Samuel nodded, watching his son eat while standing, knowing the pain he endured silently. Since that horrible day in 8th grade, Marcus had never complained, never used his injury as an excuse. Harvard has no idea what just walked through their doors, Samuel said softly. Marcus smiled. I just hope they're ready to find out. The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Eleanor Whitfield entered. Her steel-gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, her tailored suit projecting authority and tradition. She surveyed the room with calculating eyes, taking in the fresh crop of students. Welcome to Advanced Theoretical Mathematics, she began, her voice clipped and precise. Half of you won't make it past midterms. Some of you don't belong here at all. Her gaze lingered pointedly on Marcus, who stood at the back of the room. The other students had claimed seats long before class began. Mr. She consulted her roster with theatrical deliberation. Johnson, ma'am. Marcus Johnson. Mr. Johnson, Harvard provides seats for a reason. Please sit down and stop disrupting my class. A murmur rippled through the room as students turned to look. I prefer to stand, Professor, Marcus replied evenly. Professor Whitfield's eyebrows arched. Preferences are luxuries, Mr. Johnson. At Harvard, we follow protocols. I have a medical, sit down. Her words sliced through the air. Tyler Wellington, a third-generation Harvard legacy student, smirked from the front row. Scholarship students, he whispered loudly to his friends. No home training. Marcus felt his chest tighten as memory and present collided. He moved woodenly toward an empty seat, each step awakening the familiar pain. Today we'll discuss Riemannian manifolds, Professor Whitfield continued, turning to the board. Marcus lowered himself gingerly into the seat, his jaw clenched against the shooting pain that immediately radiated from his lower back. A cold sweat broke across his forehead as he tried to focus on the equations being written. 20 minutes. He could manage 20 minutes. Then he would stand again, claiming a bathroom break. Mr. Johnson, Professor Whitfield's voice cut through his concentration. Perhaps you could explain to the class why this approach fails in non-Euclidean space. All eyes turned to Marcus, whose notebook remained empty as he fought through waves of pain. The curvature tensor would. He began, his mind clouding. Exactly as I thought, Professor Whitfield said with a thin smile. Preparation is non-negotiable in my classroom. Perhaps Harvard's admissions office should reconsider its diversity initiatives. Laughter rippled through parts of the room. A young Asian American woman frowned, meeting Marcus's eyes with sympathy. Actually, Marcus managed, rising slowly to his feet, relief flooding through him as the pressure eased. In non-Euclidean space, the failure occurs because the parallel transport becomes path-dependent, invalidating the initial assumption. The laughter stopped. Professor Whitfield's smile vanished. I'll expect that level of insight in your written work, Mr. Johnson, she said coldly. If you insist on standing, move to the back where you won't distract others. As Marcus gathered his materials, Tyler stuck out his foot. Watch yourself, scholarship, he whispered. Marcus stepped over the outstretched leg, retreating to the back wall where he could stand without eyes on him. The familiar ache in his back dulled to its usual throb as he straightened, allowing his mind to clear. He would not be broken again. Not by pain. Not by prejudice. Not by the ghost of Mrs. Turner or her reincarnation in Professor Whitfield. He had survived worse to get here. Marcus Johnson, come solve this equation. 13-year-old Marcus approached the blackboard in Mrs. Turner's 8th grade advanced mathematics class. The other students watched the slender boy confidently grasp the chalk and begin working through the complex problem. Mrs. Beatrice Turner observed with narrowed eyes. Marcus was finishing the equation using a method she hadn't taught, a more elegant approach that demonstrated understanding beyond the curriculum. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "That's not how I showed the class." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Turner," Marcus replied. "I read ahead and found this method in Chapter 12. It's more efficient because—" "Sit down," she interrupted. "If you can't follow instructions, you'll never succeed." Marcus returned to his seat, confused. His father had always encouraged his mathematical explorations. Why was Mrs. Turner angry that he'd found a better solution? The pattern continued for weeks. Each time Marcus demonstrated exceptional ability, Mrs. Turner's resentment grew. The principal had praised her accelerated class for years, but now this cobbler's son was outpacing her teaching. The breaking point came during the regional mathematics competition. Mrs. Turner's students always performed well, reflecting on her reputation. But that day, Marcus achieved a perfect score, the only student in the district's history to do so. "Mrs. Turner, look." Another teacher approached with the results. "Your student Marcus broke the state record." The tight smile on Mrs. Turner's face didn't reach her eyes. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Turner kept Marcus after class. "You think you're special?" she hissed, closing the classroom door. "Showing off, making the other children feel inferior?" "No, ma'am," Marcus replied, confused. "I just love mathematics." "You need to learn your place." What happened next remained burned in Marcus's memory, the ruler striking his back repeatedly as he bent over the desk to correct his posture. The final blow, delivered with shocking force, landing directly on his lower spine. The pain had been excruciating. Marcus collapsed, unable to stand. His father's rage when he arrived at the school. The principal's hollow apologies. The doctor's grim diagnosis: the trauma caused inflammation around the spinal nerves. He may recover partially with time, but sitting for extended periods will likely always cause pain. Mrs. Turner received only a reprimand, her family's connections protecting her position. She claimed she'd merely been correcting his slouching and that Marcus had overreacted. That night, as Samuel applied warm compresses to his son's back, Marcus made a promise through tears: "I won't let her win, Dad. I'll keep learning. I'll stand if I have to." Samuel had held his son's hand tightly. "We'll find a way forward. Always forward." The memory faded as Marcus shifted his weight against Harvard's mahogany-paneled wall, Professor Whitfield's voice bringing him back to the present. Different classroom. Same prejudice. Same pain. But he was no longer that helpless child. Dean Richardson drummed his fingers on his mahogany desk, Marcus Johnson's file open before him. The student's academic record was impeccable: perfect SAT scores, National Mathematics Awards, glowing recommendations. Yet something about their encounter troubled him. "Sharon," he called to his assistant, "do we have any medical information on Marcus Johnson, class of 29? "Nothing beyond the standard health clearance, Dean," she replied after checking. "Why?" "Just curious." Richardson closed the file. A student with Johnson's qualifications standing in the cold rather than using Harvard's facilities warranted investigation. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Dr. Wilson, come in," he greeted the biology professor. Dr. Amara Wilson entered, her bright yellow headwrap contrasting with her tailored navy suit. As one of Harvard's few black female full professors, she commanded respect while navigating the institution's politics with grace. "You wanted to discuss first-year concerns?" she asked. "Yes. Have you encountered a student named Marcus Johnson?" Dr. Wilson's expression brightened. "The mathematician? He's auditing my biology seminar. Brilliant young man, asks insightful questions about biological computing models. He's primarily in Eleanor Whitfield's department, Richardson noted. Dr. Wilson's smile faded. That concerns me. Eleanor has particular views about who belongs in theoretical mathematics. Meaning last year, 2 promising minority students transferred out of her program after receiving suspiciously poor grades despite excellent work, Wilson replied carefully. Nothing provable, of course. Richardson leaned back. Have you noticed anything unusual about Johnson's classroom behavior? He always stands, Wilson said immediately. I offered him a seat during office hours, but he politely declined. I didn't press the issue. I found him studying under a streetlight rather than in the library, Richardson shared. Standing there as well. Dr. Wilson frowned. That suggests a physical limitation with sitting. Perhaps an injury. With no medical accommodation request filed, Richardson noted. Keep an eye on him, will you? And perhaps on Professor Whitfield as well. Dr. Wilson nodded. Gladly. Harvard prides itself on tradition, but some traditions deserve challenging. As she left, Richardson turned to his window, watching students cross the yard. Somewhere among them was a brilliant young man carrying a burden heavier than just his textbooks. Marcus Johnson stared at the red C- scrawled across his theoretical mathematics paper. The comments were vague, flawed reasoning and inadequate development, without specific critiques of his 15-page proof. Something wrong, scholarship? Tyler Wellington leaned over, his designer sweater brushing Marcus's arm. Turns out you're not Harvard material after all. Marcus carefully placed the paper in his folder. Just a misunderstanding. 60% of Professor Whitfield's students fail her course, Lisa Chen said from his other side, showing her own B- paper. The curve is brutal. Some more than others, Marcus observed quietly. Professor Whitfield stood at the front of the lecture hall, satisfaction evident in her posture. Those of you who performed poorly might consider whether theoretical mathematics is the appropriate field for your capabilities. Her eyes found Marcus, standing as always at the back of the room. After class, Marcus approached her desk. Professor Whitfield, I'd like to discuss my paper. She barely looked up. Office hours are posted. I've attended your office hours 3 times. You've cancelled each appointment. Now she met his gaze, her eyes cold. Perhaps that's a sign, Mr. Johnson. My proof was correct. Marcus kept his voice level. I checked it against published works. Published works? Whitfield's eyebrows rose. Above your station, aren't you? Next you'll claim to understand Langland's program. The connection between number theory and representation theory? Yes, I've studied the fundamentals. Professor Whitfield's jaw tightened. Mr. Johnson, Harvard maintains certain standards. Your background might not have prepared you for them. My background includes publishing 2 papers in undergraduate mathematics journals, Marcus countered. My proof deserves reconsideration. Submit your complaint to the department, she dismissed him. Though I wouldn't recommend drawing additional attention to your work. The threat was thinly veiled. Marcus recognized it from years of navigating educational obstacles. That evening, Lisa Chen found him at his usual streetlight. You're right, she said without preamble. I compared your paper to Wellington's. His received an A-, but your proof was more elegant and comprehensive. Marcus continued writing equations, unsurprised. Thank you for checking. I don't understand why you don't report her, Lisa pressed. On what grounds? That she grades unfairly. Every professor has subjective standards. This isn't subjective. It's. Lisa hesitated. Discrimination, Marcus finished. But proving that requires more than one paper. Lisa studied him. You're documenting everything, aren't you? A small smile crossed Marcus's face. I learned long ago to keep detailed records. She's going to fail you regardless of your work, Lisa warned. Then I'll need to make my work impossible to fail, Marcus replied. I should get back to my equations. Lisa hesitated. The study group meets in the Mathematics Commons tomorrow. We could use your insights. Marcus looked up, surprise briefly replacing his careful composure. Even Wellington's group wants my help. Tyler doesn't know I'm asking, Lisa admitted. But the midterm project is brutal. We're stuck. Conflict crossed Marcus's face, the opportunity to prove himself versus the politics of academic tribalism. I'll think about it, he finally said, turning back to his notebook as Lisa walked away. Above him, the streetlight flickered, casting shifting shadows across equations that Professor Whitfield would never acknowledge came from the mind of a cobbler's son. The Mathematics Commons buzzed with frustrated voices as Lisa's study group grappled with Professor Whitfield's midterm project, creating an original proof connecting two seemingly disparate mathematical concepts. This is impossible, groaned a sophomore named Alex. No one solved this in the 2 years she's assigned it. Someone has to eventually, Tyler Wellington replied, though his own notes were scattered and incomplete. My father's firm wants to hire the first student who cracks it. The door opened quietly, and Marcus entered, remaining near the threshold. The room fell silent. I invited him, Lisa announced to the group. Marcus understands Whitfield's theoretical framework better than anyone. Tyler scoffed. Right. The guy who's getting C's. Grades aren't always reflections of understanding, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tension. May I see what you're working on? Lisa pushed her tablet toward him. Marcus remained standing as he reviewed their work, occasionally nodding. You're approaching it from conventional topology, he observed. That's why you're hitting walls. That's how Whitfield taught it, Tyler countered defensively. She's testing whether you can think beyond her teaching, Marcus replied, taking out his own notebook. Look here. Without sitting, he balanced his notebook on the edge of the table and sketched a different approach. The group gathered around, initially skeptical, then increasingly attentive. This connects to Riemann's work, Lisa breathed, recognizing the elegance of his solution. But extends it into higher dimensions, Marcus confirmed. The connection becomes obvious when viewed through this lens. For 2 hours, Marcus guided them through his approach. Even Tyler grudgingly asked questions, his academic ambition overriding his prejudice. As the session ended, Lisa pulled Marcus aside. You've basically solved the unsolvable project. Why not use this for your own submission instead of helping everyone? Marcus smiled slightly. Because mathematics isn't about hoarding insights. It's about advancing understanding. Whitfield won't see it that way, Lisa warned. She'll accuse you of something when everyone suddenly makes progress. Let her, Marcus replied, gathering his materials. The truth reveals itself eventually. Over the following weeks, study group sessions with Marcus became clandestine affairs. Students from various mathematics courses sought his help, always meeting away from departmental eyes. Standing for hours, Marcus patiently guided frustrated students through conceptual barriers, never sitting despite the long sessions. Dr. Wilson noticed the pattern from her office window overlooking the commons. Students entering confused, leaving enlightened, all orbiting around a single figure who remained standing throughout. He's teaching them, she murmured to herself, watching Marcus sketch equations in the air. Not just helping, teaching at a level beyond what they're getting in class. Later that week, Professor Whitfield stormed into a faculty meeting. Something irregular is happening with the midterm projects, she announced. Students are suddenly producing work far beyond their demonstrated abilities. Perhaps they're rising to the challenge, Dr. Wilson suggested mildly. Or perhaps, Whitfield countered, her gaze sharp, there's academic dishonesty occurring. Unknown to either professor, Dean Richardson had been observing this quiet revolution with growing interest. The cobbler's son who refused to sit had become the axis around which Harvard's mathematics department unconsciously revolved. The accusation came without warning. Marcus stood at the back of the lecture hall as Professor Whitfield dramatically placed a stack of papers on her desk. Before we continue, I must address a serious matter, she announced. Academic dishonesty strikes at the heart of Harvard's integrity. The room fell silent. Marcus felt eyes turning toward him. Certain midterm projects demonstrated suspicious similarities, Whitfield continued. More concerning, some contained advanced concepts inappropriate for undergraduate work, suggesting plagiarism from published materials. Tyler Wellington raised his hand. Professor, I noticed some unusual approaches in the study groups. Perhaps someone should investigate who's been sharing unauthorized materials. Thank you, Mr. Wellington, Whitfield nodded. The Academic Integrity Committee will investigate. Those involved should come forward now to receive lighter consequences. Marcus maintained his composure, though his heart pounded. He knew exactly what was happening, a preemptive strike against evidence of his abilities. After class, a crowd gathered around the bulletin board where Professor Whitfield had posted names of students under investigation. Marcus's name topped the list. I warned you, Lisa whispered, finding him still standing in the emptying classroom. You're not on the list, Marcus noted. I didn't implement your complete approach, she admitted. I was afraid this would happen. Smart decision, Marcus replied without bitterness. As they walked into the hallway, they overheard Tyler speaking to a group of students. Johnson's been running underground tutoring sessions, basically giving away answers, he was saying. I attended one to gather evidence. He's using material that's clearly not his own. That's a lie, Lisa stepped forward. Marcus never gave answers. He taught concepts. Tyler smirked. The scholarship student who magically understands mathematics beyond published experts. Please. What's happening here? Dean Richardson's voice cut through the gossip. The hallway immediately quieted. Dean Richardson, Tyler straightened. We were discussing the academic dishonesty investigation. Which is confidential until completed, Richardson reminded him sharply. Mr. Johnson, a word in my office, please. As Marcus followed the dean, whispers trailed behind them. In Richardson's office, a stern-faced man in an expensive suit waited. This is Dr. Jonathan Harrington, Harvard Board of Trustees, Richardson introduced. He's taken a personal interest in Professor Whitfield's allegations. Harrington studied Marcus with undisguised skepticism. Mr. Johnson, Professor Whitfield has submitted compelling evidence that your work incorporates advanced theoretical concepts from unpublished research. My work is my own, Marcus stated simply. A cobbler's son with no access to advanced academic circles somehow independently derived postdoctoral level mathematics. Harrington's disbelief was palpable. Mathematics doesn't care about social class, Dr. Harrington. Harvard's reputation is built on integrity, Harrington continued. If these allegations are true, your scholarship would be revoked immediately. Marcus felt the weight of years pressing down, Mrs. Turner's ruler, Professor Whitfield's grades, Tyler's smirk, and now Harrington's assumptions. Always the same story, his mind couldn't possibly belong to someone like him. Dean Richardson, Marcus said quietly, I understand the seriousness of these accusations. I request the opportunity to demonstrate the originality of my work. Richardson nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. This isn't a high school science fair, Harrington objected. The committee will review the evidence and decide. A committee including Professor Whitfield, Marcus pointed out. The same professor who systematically undergrad my work despite its correctness. A tense silence filled the room. These are serious counter-allegations, Mr. Johnson, Richardson finally said. Do you have evidence? I've kept every paper, every comment, and detailed notes on all my interactions with Professor Whitfield, Marcus replied. I anticipated this day would come. Richardson and Harrington exchanged glances. There will be a formal hearing, Richardson decided. Both sets of allegations will be examined. As Marcus left the office, the pain in his back seemed almost insignificant compared to the weight of injustice he'd carried for years. But for the first time, someone in authority might actually be willing to see the truth. Samuel Johnson's hands trembled as he read the formal notice from Harvard's Academic Integrity Committee. His weathered fingers, darkened by decades of shoe polish and leather dye, crumpled the paper's edge. "Marcus," he whispered, "why didn't you tell me things had gotten this bad?" "You have enough to worry about, Dad," Marcus replied, organizing a stack of notebooks on their small kitchen table. "Besides, this isn't my first academic witch hunt." A firm knock interrupted them. Marcus opened the door to find Dr. Amara Wilson on their doorstep, her expression resolute. "Dr. Wilson. How did you find us?" "Dean Richardson provided your address," she explained, stepping inside. "I've requested to serve as your faculty advocate during the hearing." Samuel stood quickly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You're helping my son." "Your son has been helping half the mathematics department," Dr. Wilson replied with a slight smile. "It's time someone returned the favor." Together, they prepared for the hearing. Dr. Wilson reviewed Marcus's meticulous documentation while Samuel made coffee. "You've been recording everything since day one," Dr. Wilson marveled, flipping through notebooks filled with dates, times, comments, and mathematical proofs. "I learned after Mrs. Turner that my word alone would never be enough," Marcus explained. "Mrs. Turner?" Dr. Wilson questioned. Marcus exchanged glances with his father. "The reason I stand instead of sit." Understanding dawned in Dr. Wilson's eyes. "You need to tell the committee everything, Marcus. This isn't just about academic integrity anymore." Across campus, Professor Whitfield was building her own case. Wellington sat across from her, rehearsing his testimony about Marcus's unauthorized teaching. "Remember," Whitfield instructed, "focus on how his explanations seemed rehearsed, as if reciting someone else's work." "What if they ask for proof?" Tyler asked nervously. "Your word as a Wellington carries weight," she assured him. "The burden of proof is on Johnson to demonstrate originality, which is impossible given the advanced nature of his work." The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray. The committee, comprised of 3 professors, Dean Richardson, and Dr. Harrington, convened in the oak-paneled faculty senate room. Professor Whitfield presented first, displaying side-by-side comparisons of Marcus's work with published papers, highlighting superficial similarities while ignoring fundamental differences. Furthermore, she concluded, Mr. Johnson has been conducting unauthorized tutoring sessions, distributing solutions beyond his demonstrated abilities. "Teaching is not academic dishonesty," Dr. Wilson countered when her turn came. "And these comparisons deliberately misrepresent Mr. Johnson's original contributions." The room grew tense as Marcus finally stood to defend himself. Unlike previous sessions, he had a chair specially prepared with back support, though he chose to remain standing. "Members of the committee," he began, "I've endured Professor Whitfield's prejudice since my first day at Harvard. These accusations represent the culmination of a systematic effort to discredit me because of who I am and where I come from." He methodically presented his evidence, the pattern of undergrading, cancelled office hours, and dismissive comments. Then he revealed his complete mathematical framework, demonstrating how his approach built upon but fundamentally extended existing theory. "This work is mine," he stated simply. "Developed through years of independent study while I stood beneath streetlights because classroom seats were physical torture for me." A murmur ran through the room. Dr. Harrington leaned forward. "What do you mean, physical torture?" Marcus looked to his father, who nodded encouragement. "I suffer from a spinal injury," Marcus explained. "Sitting for more than a few minutes causes severe pain. I've stood through every class, every study session, every examination since 8th grade. Why wasn't this reported to Disability Services?" Dean Richardson asked. Samuel Johnson rose from his seat. "My son feared losing his scholarship if Harvard knew he required accommodation. After what happened with Mrs. Turner, we didn't trust another institution to see his mind beyond his circumstances." The hearing stretched for hours, with witnesses from both sides testifying. Lisa Chen confirmed Marcus's teaching methods. Other students reluctantly admitted the brilliance of his explanations. When Tyler Wellington took the stand, his testimony began confidently but crumbled under Dr. Wilson's cross-examination, revealing that he had never actually attended Marcus's study sessions and had fabricated his claims at Professor Whitfield's suggestion. As the committee adjourned to deliberate, Marcus stood by the window, watching snow begin to fall across Harvard Yard. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally spoken aloud. 3 days after the hearing, Marcus received an unusual summons from Dean Richardson. The Academic Integrity Committee had reached an unorthodox decision. Rather than ruling immediately, they would hold a special demonstration session. "They want me to prove myself publicly?" Marcus asked his father as they reviewed the notice. Samuel's eyes reflected concern. "Sounds like a performance, not justice." Or perhaps, Dr. Wilson suggested, joining them in the waiting area outside Richardson's office, "It's the only way to convince certain committee members that your abilities are genuine." The demonstration was scheduled for the following day in Conant Hall's largest lecture theater. Word spread quickly, and by afternoon, the hall was filled with students, faculty, and even curious administrators. Professor Whitfield sat in the front row, her expression tightly controlled. Dr. Harrington beside her, skepticism etched in his features. Dean Richardson took the podium. "This unusual session has been arranged to resolve questions regarding Mr. Johnson's mathematical capabilities. The committee has prepared a series of problems that will be revealed for the first time today." Dr. Harrington stood. "To ensure fairness, these problems have been developed by external mathematicians and sealed until this moment. They represent graduate-level challenges that would typically require significant time to solve." A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus stood calmly at the front, his face betraying no emotion though his heart raced. His father sat in the second row, hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Johnson will have 2 hours," Richardson continued. "Professor Whitfield has agreed that if he demonstrates genuine understanding and original thinking, all allegations will be withdrawn." The first problem appeared on the large screen, a complex topological challenge involving manifolds. Marcus studied it briefly before turning to the whiteboard. Without sitting, he began working through the problem methodically, his hand moving confidently across the board. 30 minutes later, he stepped back from a complete solution. The external mathematician nodded, impressed. "Correct approach, innovative application," she confirmed. The second problem proved more demanding, an unsolved question in number theory with implications for cryptography. Marcus worked silently, occasionally pausing to close his eyes in concentration. The audience watched, transfixed, as equations flowed from his marker. When he finally completed his proof, the mathematician reviewing it looked stunned. "This is an entirely original approach," she admitted. "It would need peer review, but the reasoning appears sound." Dr. Harrington frowned. "The third problem, please." The final challenge appeared, a notorious mathematical puzzle that had resisted solution for decades. A collective gasp rippled through the knowledgeable audience members. "This is unreasonable," Dr. Wilson objected. "That's a known unsolved problem." "Which makes it an excellent test," Professor Whitfield replied. "If Mr. Johnson truly possesses extraordinary ability, let him demonstrate it conclusively." All eyes turned to Marcus, who studied the problem intently. Samuel Johnson straightened in his seat, worry creasing his brow. Minutes passed in tense silence. Marcus made no move toward the board, instead closing his eyes in deep concentration. 10 minutes. 15. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably. Professor Whitfield's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Then, without opening his notes, Marcus turned to the clean whiteboard and began writing. Not equations at first, but words, an outline of his approach, a roadmap of his thinking. Then came the mathematics, flowing in a structured progression that built towards something unexpected. The audience watched in stunned silence as Marcus filled board after board, periodically erasing sections to continue his work. The full 2 hours elapsed, but Richardson made no move to stop him. The demonstration had transformed into something beyond a test, it had become a masterclass. Finally, Marcus set down his marker. "This isn't a complete solution," he acknowledged. But it establishes a framework that suggests the problem's undecidability is linked to its formulation rather than its inherent mathematics. The external mathematician stood speechless for several moments, reviewing the boards carefully. This, she finally said, her voice unsteady, is publishable work. It advances our understanding of the problem significantly. In 30 years of mathematics, I've never seen an undergraduate produce insight of this caliber. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Students who had witnessed Marcus helping others now understood the depth of mind behind those patient explanations. Faculty members exchanged looks of astonishment. Professor Whitfield sat rigidly, her face pale. Dr. Harrington's expression had transformed from skepticism to grudging respect. Samuel Johnson wiped tears from his eyes as his son stood tall amidst the acclaim, vindicating years of silent struggle and determination. Dean Richardson approached the podium once more, his voice carrying over the diminishing applause. I believe we have our answer regarding Mr. Johnson's abilities. The formal letter from Harvard's Academic Integrity Committee arrived exactly 1 week after the demonstration. All allegations against Marcus had been unanimously dismissed. Furthermore, the committee recommended a comprehensive review of Professor Whitfield's grading practices and a formal investigation into the fabricated testimony against Marcus. It's over, Samuel said quietly as Marcus read the letter aloud in their small living room. Not quite, Marcus replied. There's more. The committee had also approved retroactive medical accommodation for Marcus's condition, with Professor Whitfield required to re-evaluate all his previous work without prejudice. Additionally, Harvard would establish a special fellowship for him to pursue independent research while completing his undergraduate degree. They're acknowledging your genius, Samuel observed, pride evident in his voice. They're acknowledging their mistake, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The next day, Marcus arrived at campus to find the academic landscape transformed. Students who had previously ignored him now approached with respectful greetings. Faculty members who had never noticed him stopped to introduce themselves. Dr. Wilson met him outside the mathematics building. The dean wants to see you, she explained, walking beside him. And there's something you should know first. Your demonstration has caused quite a stir beyond Harvard. In Richardson's office, Marcus found not only the dean but also representatives from 3 major mathematics journals and the head of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's mathematics department. Mr. Johnson, Dean Richardson began, your approach to that unsolved problem has generated significant interest. These gentlemen have proposals for you. The offers came quickly: publication opportunities, research positions, speaking engagements. Marcus listened attentively, standing as always, his posture betraying no discomfort despite the lengthy meeting. As the external visitors departed, Richardson gestured for Marcus to remain. There's one more matter, he said, his expression serious. Professor Whitfield has requested to speak with you. Marcus tensed visibly. I have nothing to say to her. She has something to say to you, Richardson countered gently. It might be worth hearing. In a small conference room adjacent to the dean's office, Professor Whitfield waited. Her usual imperious demeanor had vanished, replaced by a subdued, almost fragile quality. Mr. Johnson, she began, then corrected herself. Marcus. I owe you an apology. Marcus remained silent, watching her carefully. I made assumptions, she continued, based on preconceptions that I'm now deeply ashamed of. Your work is exceptional. My treatment of you was unforgivable. Why? Marcus asked simply. Why did you look at me and see something to destroy rather than nurture? Whitfield sighed heavily. Because you reminded me of everything I fought against in my own career. Mathematics was a man's world when I began. Every breakthrough required twice the proof from me. I became the very gatekeepers I once resented. That explanation helps you, Marcus observed, but didn't help me when you were trying to end my academic future. No, she agreed, it doesn't. Nothing excuses what I did. The committee has recommended my suspension pending review. I've decided to resign instead. Marcus felt no satisfaction at her downfall, only a weary recognition of patterns repeating. "Mrs. Turner never apologized," he said quietly. "Mrs. Turner? The teacher who broke my back when I was 13. For showing mathematical ability beyond what she thought appropriate for someone like me." Whitfield blanched. "That's why you cannot sit." Marcus nodded once. "I had no idea." "You never asked," Marcus replied. "You saw what you expected to see." As he turned to leave, Professor Whitfield spoke once more. "Your thesis proposal, on non-Euclidean applications to quantum field theory, it's brilliant. I hope someone worthy helps you develop it." Marcus paused at the door. "The mathematics is what matters, Professor. Not who delivers it or receives it. That's what I tried to show your students all along." Walking through Harvard Yard afterward, Marcus stopped at the streetlight where Dean Richardson had first noticed him. The campus spread around him, its centuries of tradition both a barrier and a gateway. His father waited under the elm tree they had designated as their meeting spot, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he caught sight of his son. "How does it feel?" Samuel asked as Marcus approached. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Like a beginning, not an ending." Together, they walked toward the future, the cobbler and his son who had remapped Harvard's understanding of brilliance. Spring blossomed across Harvard's campus. In the mathematics department, significant changes had taken shape in the months following Marcus's vindication. The newly established Johnson Scholarship for exceptional students from disadvantaged backgrounds had already selected its first 3 recipients. Dr. Wilson chaired the selection committee, ensuring that academic potential would not be overlooked due to circumstance or background. Marcus entered the renovated Mathematics Commons, which now featured standing desks alongside traditional seating. Students worked in diverse groups, the artificial boundaries between legacy and scholarship students noticeably diminished. "Professor Johnson." Lisa Chen called out, waving from a study group that included faces from across Harvard's demographic spectrum. Even Tyler Wellington sat among them, his former arrogance replaced by a more thoughtful demeanor. "Not a professor yet," Marcus reminded her with a smile. "Just a teaching fellow." "The youngest in Harvard's history," Lisa countered. "We're still getting used to it." Marcus had accepted a unique position, completing his undergraduate degree while simultaneously teaching first-year students and pursuing independent research. The arrangement acknowledged both his exceptional abilities and his physical needs. Dean Richardson appeared at the doorway. "Marcus, do you have a moment?" They walked together through the yard, Richardson matching Marcus's measured pace. "The board voted unanimously on your proposal," the dean informed him. "Starting next fall, Harvard will implement comprehensive reforms to its accommodation policies and anti-discrimination protocols." "And Dr. Harrington supported this?" Marcus asked, surprised. Richardson chuckled. "Harrington now tells anyone who'll listen that he discovered you. Amazing how success transforms perceptions." They reached the administration building where Samuel Johnson waited, dressed in his best suit. "Ready?" Samuel asked, straightening his tie nervously. "More than ready," Marcus assured him. Inside, a small ceremony commemorated the endowment of the Samuel Johnson Center for Educational Equity, funded by donors impressed by Marcus's story and dedicated to identifying and supporting academically gifted students from underprivileged backgrounds. As Samuel cut the ribbon, his hands steady and proud, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain remained, he would likely always stand rather than sit, but it had transformed from a limitation into a symbol of perseverance. Later that evening, Marcus returned to their home above the cobbler's shop. His father sat at his workbench, carefully restoring an antique pair of women's shoes. "What did Mrs. Turner say when the Harvard letter arrived at her school?" Samuel asked, looking up from his work. Marcus smiled slightly. "The principal said she turned white as a sheet." Apparently, having a former student establish a scholarship specifically for victims of educational discrimination made quite an impression. Samuel nodded with satisfaction. "Justice takes many forms. It's not about revenge," Dad, Marcus said, checking his lecture notes for tomorrow's class. It's about making sure no other child stands alone under a streetlight because the alternative is too painful to bear. Samuel set down his tools and embraced his son. Your mother would be so proud. Outside their window, streetlights flickered on across Cambridge. At Harvard, students gathered in libraries and commons, some sitting, some standing, all pursuing knowledge in a system slightly more equitable than it had been the previous year. And in a small classroom across campus, a note waited on the special ergonomic podium installed for Marcus's morning lecture. Thank you for standing up for all of us. Your students. The cobbler's son had not just secured his own place at Harvard, he had widened the door for those who would follow. Dear friend, education should never come with the price of dignity. This story reminds us that brilliance exists in every neighborhood, in every socio-economic class, and in every color of skin. When we judge intelligence by appearance or background, we don't just harm individuals, we rob society of extraordinary contributions. The next world-changing mind might be studying under a streetlight because they have nowhere else to go. Your support helps us continue sharing these crucial stories that challenge prejudice and inspire change. If this message touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can build a world where talent is nurtured wherever it's found.